All right, happy to have with us today former House Majority Leader and current Chairman of FreedomWorks, Dick Armey. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm just fine. Happy to be with you.
Excellent. Well, happy to have you here. Wanted to talk to you. It's been a crazy week for a lot of people, including former Speaker Newt Gingrich. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is this notion that in 1993, Republicans were supporting an alternative to Hillary Care that included mandates, where you were mandated to buy private insurance. Is that right, or was Newt wrong about that?
I don't recall that, and I can't for the life of me believe that such a thing could have been happening, and I wouldn't have had a very, very clear reaction against it. So, I mean, I don't know what Newt's remembering, but I certainly don't remember anything like that.
So you're saying that it was not, according to your recollection at least, that it was
According
not.
to my recollection, there was no such initiative supported by the Republican conference, and frankly, I can't imagine that anyone could have convinced the Republican conference to support such a thing as that.
Wow, that is interesting. Well, I wanted to talk obviously about FreedomWorks and about your Wall Street Journal op-ed, but wanted to ask you because Newt did announce for president, and if you were running for president, I would be asking him these questions. I want to know what's in his head. The latest thing he came up with that I just learned apparently yesterday, he said on the radio, was his potential solution for immigration would be to appoint local boards to go around their community determining which immigrants should be made citizens, or not citizens, but should be legalized versus deported. Tell us, who is Newt Gingrich? Where does he get these ideas?
I really don't know. I mean, this is so typical of Newt Gingrich. In all the years I've known him, but during the early years before he became Speaker, he was always called the gadfly, and the reason was he always sort of jumped from one idea to another, and it was always hard to keep up with it because by the time you'd begin to digest what he was thinking about with one idea, he was off on another one. But I just have to say once again, I don't know where he comes up with this idea, nor do I understand what he thinks he accomplishes, either with respect to good public policy for the country or with respect to the chances of getting himself elected.
Well, let's talk about the thing that really got him in trouble was presumably, and I guess there's some question about this, but presumably he called Paul Ryan's Medicare plan right-wing social engineering. And I'm wondering if you could speak to your take on that comment and also just your take on the Ryan plan in general.
Well, I think probably of all the things Newt's done recently that have been a stunning surprise to me, it's his criticism of Paul Ryan's efforts on the budget. I mean, the fact of the matter is, we all know, the world knows beyond any shadow of a doubt, that if we don't deal with entitlement spending, we'll never be able to get the budget under control. Paul Ryan has been one of the few people in the Republican Party that have had the courage to attack these issues. I've said for years that all public policy discourse, especially in the area of entitlement reform, has been carried out by Republicans that don't dare and Democrats that don't care. And yet, here for the first time, we have a Republican who really does step out front and says, "Let's take these things and deal with them because it's so critical to the nation's interest." And by the way, a Republican that has endeared himself immensely to the activists out there whose affections Newt covets so much, and yet Newt launches his attack on them. I don't get it. I don't understand it whatsoever.
And by the way, everyone should read, it's in Friday's Wall Street Journal, the Medicare test for president. A candidate who is timid on entitlement reform is not qualified to lead the country. And this is Dick Armey and Matt Kibbe, your op-ed in the Wall Street Journal on that topic. Newt did have an interesting theory, though. I will give him this. I think he completely mishandled the communication of this. But he does have an interesting theory, which is to say that rather than coming up with our proposal, even if it's a good proposal, and sort of mandating that as an alternative, of giving the public a choice. And I think his argument is that when you're making big change, even if it's conservative change, when you make big change, you have to go slowly. You have to educate the public and bring them along with you. And then giving them choices where they're choosing the conservative alternative. Newt, I think, would have done better had he stuck to that principle. I'm wondering what your take is on that nuance.
Well, certainly he would have done better had he stuck to that principle, but in fact, I think to a large extent this is what Paul Ryan was arguing himself in his own effort, which is let people be free to choose to seek their health care destiny in the private sector through private options. So, again, I don't, the extent to which the public must be educated to new ideas, I think is probably a little bit stretched too far. I don't think Newt. I think he, in this instance, is laboring over a chronic ailment that affects people in Washington, which is that, gee, we know, and bless your heart, you folks, when you are properly educated by us, you will know too. And I think that is considered somewhat abrasive by a lot of people who know they know, because it's their lives in the final analysis.
Well, if you could tell us a little bit, I know this could be a book here, but you know, a lot of folks who are now Tea Party people, or really any of us, some don't remember the 90s, don't remember the Republican Revolution. You were the House Majority Leader. Newt Gingrich was the Speaker. I know it's a long story, but could you give us just a short version of how at one point you were allies and you worked together, and then how you sort of parted ways?
Well, quite frankly, that was the point at which Newt understood that if we were ever going to become a majority, we had to find a way to get what should I say? I use the term the old fogies in the then current Republican leadership to get out of our way so that we could go about our business of changing the majority. And quite frankly, at that time, people don't remember this, but we were the subject of much ridicule by the Washington establishment. Newt, not only Newt, but myself as well. And so that's one of the things that sort of amazes me, that once again he comes up and he's got a young guy in the person of Paul Ryan, who is quite creative in his thinking, quite courageous in order to take on the big problems facing our country, and you've got Newt trying to suppress him. I would think Newt might remember the days when we were the guys that the establishment people were wishing would just kind of dry up and go away because we were making their life uncomfortable.
Well, and some people have speculated that there's a generational envy there, that, you know, during Newt's interview with Rush Limbaugh yesterday, he happened to mention, you know, yeah, Callista's known Paul Ryan since he was an intern. So he went out of his way to mention that, you know, Ryan was an intern. And I mean, I know I'm asking you to be a little bit of a psychologist here, but you know Newt a lot better than I do. I mean, do you think there's any sort of a resentment that here's another ideas guy? I used to be the ideas guy.
Well,
is there anything there?
I've had others raise that question with me too, and Newt does tend to be oftentimes a little insecure about it. What's his place? So, I mean, while I'm not a psychologist and couldn't really venture a guess on that, I do believe that it's a plausible explanation for what is fundamentally implausible behavior.